I'll start off by saying thank you for your participation. Be willing to have me ask questions. So I'll let you know what kind of class this is. This is an interview for a course that is about sex and gender in cross-cultural perspective. So I'm going to be asking questions that reference back to that theme. So I'd like to start off by asking, what is your name or a name that you would like to be referred to for this interview?
We'll go with the abbreviation initials, AD.
AD, okay. And AD, are you comfortable with me recording you and asking questions about your personal experiences?
Sure. I mean, it depends what
Okay.
year.
Well, you can always decline to answer if you
Okay,
want
okay.
to. It's open.
Sounds good,
All
sounds
right.
good.
Okay, AD. So, first question. How old are you?
Once again, what year are we talking about? No.
Or
Yeah, as many
okay.
times as the sun goes around. I'm 36, treading on 37.
Okay. All right. So, do you are you from? Where are you from?
I'm from originally and currently and futurely Miracle Mile, a little town that
Well,
is known South California.
Southern California. Okay. So you have you always? And you said you were born here, so you've always been a resident of this area.
Yeah, always born and raised.
Okay. Born and raised. Okay. So, nationality wise, you are American.
Born American, correct? Yeah.
Okay. Great. Do you have any other kinds of identifications that you feel are important to your how you see yourself,
Mm,
like in society?
yeah, I mean, when it comes to society, that's a little bit of a different label. So it really just depends the environment. But as just a whole human, the human race.
Okay. All right. So, that's a great answer. That's always a great answer. I do feel that part of our society likes to ask further questions. For example, when we take, tests in school, they often ask us, what is our name, and they want to ask your gender, your ethnicity, all these other kind of questions. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, it's always an instant. Just it's kind of like it's like a rewind and a fast forwarding at the exact same time when you're only supposed to be filling out something as simple as an application, more or less, um, because you have to get a perspective of, well, this is going to be accounted for in the future. Say, um, I don't know. Let's say you have an emergency in the future and you're in the hospital and you check a box that isn't necessarily the correct box, and then it comes to haunt you later, and all because of that one little application. So it's supposed to be something that's trivial because it is really trivial, but it could be something that can come to haunt you later. So I mean, it matters more than it really should.
And so when it comes to these kinds of identification units, what are some that you find a little bit problematic?
There's the nuances. You know,
Uh,
it's
like for example, like ethnicity and those kinds of things.
yes. Well, I mean specifically ethnicities and yeah, and
Okay.
race. Yeah.
So if you were to if you were to answer, what is your ethnicity? What do you identify as? If you have to identify as something, what would that be?
Personally, there's not an option that's available. But if I were to create other, it would be the other box. But I hate other because other always to me just means okay, you're just pushed aside and ignored, and then therefore you have to go with the alternative, which is not really the alternative, which is basically you're just being boxed in, which is what society wants you to be. But if I had a choice to answer the question, it wouldn't be other, but I would actually fill in what other would mean.
Okay. Do you feel that these kinds of social groups that are you feel that they are ascribed to you based on your appearance, based on what people expect you to say?
Well, I mean, yeah, definitely everything is. It's it's based on aesthetics. But of course, if things are being filled out not with non-visuals, then it has to do with assets or tangible things, one or the other.
Right? So going on in terms of identification, the class is about gender and sexuality. So that is a big question right now in terms of, sometimes people feel that they are prejudged on their appearance, on what they're expected to answer. So how do you feel about that in terms of gender and sexuality? And if you feel comfortable, what is the gender that you identify as, and what is the sexuality you identify as, and how do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, those are two different things. And I think that's why there's that line that's always being divided between sexuality and gender. Gender is how you identify yourself, and that's basically at the end of the day is you either identify yourself as a woman or as a man. And that's just the way that it is. Now, sexuality, that has to do with intimacy. That has to do with who you fall in love with, who you fall out in love with, how you see people have a community of multiple relationships, whether it's between a group, whether it's the yin and the yang, whether it's three, whether it's 15, whether you're Hugh Hefner, here or there. Now, the problem is everyone gets sexuality and gender mixed in as in one. And then people think, well, if this person wants to be a woman and they were born a man and vice versa, well, how are they having sex in the bedroom? Well, that's not neither here nor there, and that's no one's business. What is people's business is for someone who wants to identify with their gender. And that's the distinction that it's so hard for people to make still till this day, because people are too preoccupied with being nosy and not minding their own business that they want to know people's sexuality instead of knowing people's gender, because those are two very different arenas that we're talking about. But as in me per se, I mean, I guess I'm kind of like on the verge of old new school. So I'm old school when it comes to this. I'm not into the pronouns, but that just overcomplicates things. Like I'm very straightforward. Like you're either here or you're there. And at the end of the day, everyone only has two holes. So it's he, she, we. It's he and she, and then there's we.
So how do you feel about the concept of third genders?
Oh, well,
Like
you mean
like a
like,
gender fluid.
yeah,
You said like in
that's,
old school, when it was very much, you use the term heteronormative, where it's okay, you're a man and you're a woman, but then they have other concepts of like intersex, and people who are born with ambiguous body, genitalia, and third genders, people who just don't want maybe they were assigned male at birth, but they say no, I'm actually female. How do you feel about that?
well, I mean, it boils down to religion. I mean, this is all a mirror of religion, because if we remember, whether you were Christian, Catholic, etc., etc., you were agnostic if you didn't believe in this, or you had a secular label or title. Well, it's the exact same thing. The only thing is now we're talking about it on a sexual level. So now it's, well, how do you identify when it's people are hung up when it comes to the anatomy. People want to know, well, have you made that transition? Are you just dressing up, and do you just have, and see, this is when it comes into the transgender community. And there's a big, big, big misconception when it comes to that. There's one avenue that everyone knows as the transgender, which is somebody that's born in the body and in the gender that do not believe is their own. And then there is the community of the drag queens. The drag queens, which has been made hugely popular with RuPaul, and everyone still till this day misconstrues the difference between a Caitlyn Jenner, who comes from obviously the very popular Dynasty, to a RuPaul's Drag Race. Those are two different communities. Those are two different worlds. But still, people think that it's the same one, and that's where the difference
So,
lies.
you're saying that there's a lot more nuance that people aren't catching, um, based on kind of like societal norms.
Exactly. I mean, everyone's trying to accept it and celebrate it, but they still don't understand it.
So, do you feel that your experiences with the gender that you feel that you reflect? Do you feel comfortable saying which gender you present yourself as?
Oh yeah, I'm just a gay man, through and through, 1,000%. There's no, I mean, the fluidity, I guess, going back to the previous question and how I felt about fluidity and how do I feel about the pronouns they and all of that in that landscape. I'm a through and through gay man, 1,000%. Where I don't have that. Well, it's not confusion because that would be a really really bad word to say. But I don't have this. Well, one day I feel this way, one day I feel the other way. I know who I am. I've always known who I was. It's so for me. That's where the difficulty lies.
So, do you feel that society is playing catch up with what you already know about yourself?
Um, sure, yeah. There's that, and but more importantly, above that, I feel like we should be at a point where there's been enough infrastructure, there's been enough prototype, including myself, where people should be a little bit more advanced and feel a little bit more comfortable. Where instead, I feel like we're infiltrating within our own selves. Meaning, like, as much as we're trying to push in the propaganda of let's accept, let's all accept, we're blurring the lines even further. So then now with all of these extra pronouns, with all of this, like, in just speaking of just the U.S. in a whole, people are like middle America. They're barely trying to catch up with just gay guys like making out still. And so how are we trying to push all these new pronouns and all of these new words and all of these new, personal feelings? And we get it, like everyone has their own personal feelings. But as answering the question, how do I identify and how do I see with fluidity? I feel like it's harming the community as a whole because we need people to accept everyone for who they love and what they love. But we cannot expect for people to go outside of themselves and to just go out of their way and say, okay, well, I'm going to learn all of this about your life, your community, your gender, your sexuality, when these people don't know what's going on with their own. So as a community, I would just say everyone needs to like pull a few breaks. Everyone needs to relax with their little pronouns and they, he, what it is. And let's just, let's advance and let's just be celebratory of what advancements we've made, which is a lot, you know.
So, for your self-identification as a gay man, uh, is that something that you mentioned that you've always known that have you always been comfortable with that? Were there any kind of anything that you felt that
No,
was
no,
there?
no. I no. That's no.
Are
Go
you
on.
comfortable saying more about that, about your experiences with you know, being a gay man and having people accept you as that?
Sure. Being born right at the cusp of, I always think is predominantly like the good of the last of the 70s and 80s, but the precipice of what was in the future, which was obviously the digital age, the internet, and in the 90s, that was something that was very profound because it was very much just being on a seesaw and getting the goods from both worlds. And getting that good from both worlds, you also had very much speaking on the topic of the question, sexuality. So sexuality very much was the name of the game. So sexuality was introduced from both worlds. So whether you were part of the future world, which was the internet age, which was the digital world, or you were part of what was now known as a past world, old world. And that was a different learning of sexuality. So because I feel like I was on the cusp of both, I really got the end of both worlds. So my sexuality, my identification of my sexuality was very much influenced by both worlds, both eras, both generations.
So, do you feel that then, to describe the 90s, growing up in LA in the 90s, that had a really big role in how you came to be in terms of as a societal being?
I think there's a little bit of a innocent, I would say, not ignorance, but um, blissful happiness, I guess. When you grow up in the city, you really, I mean, for me at least, I really felt that the rest of the country was the same.
Do you feel
Call
like,
it
sorry, cutting you off.
no go.
Finish.
I was just saying, call it being impressionable, call it being naive. However you look at it, I mean, I really felt like the whole country was a melting pot. I really felt that you would walk into whether it was your local mall or whether you were going to the theater or you were attending your local concert, whatever it may be. I felt like everyone in the world was sharing what I was sharing, which was living in the city, specifically Los Angeles, not New York, not Chicago, not any of these places in Texas, etc. Of course, you have that naiveness, and once again, that plays into part with with my sexuality and how I identified my gender because don't get it twisted. I mean, growing up, I very much was a questionable person because I was 5, 6, 7 years old and I was very much enjoying dressing up in feminine clothing. I would, steal my mom's clothing and or other women's clothing and put it on, but not for the effect that I was not identifying with my gender. Speaking about gender, it was because I was playing dress up. For me, I'm an entertainer. I wanted to be an entertainer, so that to me was just playing costume. That was dress up. It wasn't like I did not feel comfortable with who I was, with my anatomies, and so forth.
So there was, for you, there was no, how do you say, like, discomfort in wearing that. You didn't feel any kind of shame or anything. You just went, when I want to wear a dress, I'm going to wear a dress.
No, what's funny that you say that is that not at all, not at all, not even a drop. However, what I did feel ashamed or what I did feel a little bit embarrassment about was being caught, but not how I felt because I knew that's what I felt was right because I felt comfortable. And what is comfortable to one is what's always right. But what I did feel embarrassed about and what I felt humiliation for myself was the humiliation for the other person, for them catching me. Because I always felt like my gender and my sexuality was going to humiliate other people. And I never wanted anyone else to be humiliated. But I felt 1000% comfortable.
So the other people on this is your family, obviously, because you were not obviously, but this is your family, like your parents. Like,
Yeah. My parents, yeah, exactly. Father more in particular, but yeah, family, sure.
so did you have a good or positive relationship when you were a child with your parents?
You think so? When you're young, you think you only see the good, or at least I only saw the good. I had a very different portrayal of who my family was growing up, and I felt like growing up it did benefit me. So I'm really grateful for that till this day, even though it has come to harbor and bring a lot of ill willing and not so, not such great things as you get older. But you learn that this happens in life a lot of times. Like you can go through a lot of decades and years and not really have any understandings of certain situations. Speaking of specifically your sexuality, and then you feel like, well, you manifested your dreams, your passions, and then your family, and then somehow your sexuality came into play, and you can't help to feel like maybe if you would have been a straight cisgender male and my gender would have been differently, maybe the dynamics with my family would have been different.
So do you have other siblings?
I do. I have one sibling. She's a female.
And did your parents have a preference for either one of you? Did you feel any kind of a preference or anything that might have influenced that why you were afraid to wear the dresses, for example?
When it comes to my sister, no. I can't say like that really ever played a part in it because um it we have such a huge range in age. So, yeah, it wasn't that big of a factor. Like it was more maybe a reflection of, the daughter versus son, which is kind of, if you really think about it now, um it actually had nothing to do with my gender or my sexuality at that point. That for me was just trying to live up to being the brother and son, regardless of my gender and sexuality, because I needed to identify just as a son and as a brother, and I needed to give everything that a brother and a son would give. So, yeah, I guess now thinking about it, yeah, I did ignore my sexuality and my essentially my gender because I needed to just be that son and that brother.
And yeah, so it was kind of an internalized pressure you feel more than it was that it was more about a family dynamics rather than necessarily your gender or sexuality, as you mentioned.
Well, no, it's definitely not. I mean, you can internalize everything, but it definitely isn't because when you hear things around the family environment and you go on into the realm of the lovely, we love our relatives, and that always brings out a bunch of fun things. And so you see, the thing is that like as you grow up, and again in the age that we were, like as I'm approaching the age that I am now, 36, going on the threshold of 37, young, I look back and I'm more and more often thinking about my parents and what they were like when they were exactly the age of 36 going on 37. And I look back and I think now I remind myself, okay, this is what they were thinking at that time and this is why they did what they did. And you're just a kid yourself, so you're just kind of trying to figure everything out as you go along. But I find myself more and more kind of trying to think what they were thinking or feeling, finding me and looking at me when I was, let's say, the first time my mom did find me stealing her clothes, which I don't think stealing is I mean, hello, Tisha. We're under one roof. One roof is everyone's clothes is the same. But yeah, that was pretty interesting. But now that I look back, I think, wow, like I understand now that they must have been so confused.
Do you remember what age you were then?
The first time my mom caught me with her clothes.
Uh huh.
Yeah, I was, I think, not exactly, but I was in high school, like 14, 15.
Okay. What did she ever ask you, or if you were gay, or did she ever ask you anything about that?
Actually, it
Any
was older.
assumptions,
Actually, it was
or just
older, like later than that. But yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't hear you.
No, oh, I said no. I actually it was. It was towards the end. I thought it was in the beginning because I was doing it in the beginning. But when she finally caught me, yeah, it was towards the end of high school. But yeah.
Okay. And was there any issue with that, or was there?
Oh yeah. Oh no. I mean, are you kidding me? It was. I mean, it was pretty much like "Mommy Dearest," and instead of the wire hangers, it was like, "Why are you wearing my pants?" And I was like, I mean, hello, as a gay boy, I was like, oh my God, mom, can you do that again? And can like we get a fake Oscar? I mean, that's what I loved. That's what I was thinking in my head. But I knew my mom, she was not part of that world. She's, who she is. She's a woman of a particular age and comes from a particular generation, and a race. So I knew that. But in that moment, that's what I felt. And because I was so young, I didn't know any better, so I didn't take anything personally. So for me, it was just silly. But I, like I said, looking at it now, I realize that wow, she probably obviously felt a certain way. But for me, I just thought like, oh my God, like you caught me. But to me, I never thought it was a big deal anyways, because at the end of the day, we're talking about textiles, you know, which
Right.
are, yeah,
It's just a piece of fabric that you're wearing.
exactly.
So what was the age that you came out to your parents?
Oh, well, that was an interesting unravel unravelment. Is that even a word? I don't know. Unravelment?
Unraveling.
Unraveling, there you go. Yeah. Um I officially, which is I guess officially without being a statement, fold. I think the for me at least coming out to my mom first was an official coming out was when I had a second boyfriend, and we went out to dinner, and it was a relationship where I had a taste of everything that was supposed to be formal and traditional. So the fact that he wanted to traditionally and cordially meet my mother and have a dinner and yada yada etc. Um, that was like the first time I officially came out to my mom. Even though she knew I had already been gay. Let's say for at least 7, 8 years before that. But no, we had not officially actually come out like verbally up until that day, which is kind of a twist now that I think about it, right? Like, yeah, I come out to my mom like 8 years after she knew I was gay, but with my second boyfriend. Yeah, that's when I officially came out with my mom. If
How
that's,
did she know you were gay 8 years prior?
well, I mean, it started with the clothes.
Okay. There was a buildup of signs
Yeah,
maybe.
and then I think essentially she would ask me questions like, the typical questions of like, obviously, where's your girlfriend? Why don't you have a girlfriend? And it's like, well, you found me with your clothes, and I don't have a girlfriend, and well, hello, genius.
And you mentioned earlier when we were talking about pronouns, and you mentioned religion. Did your family or did you have any connection to religion when you were growing up? And what was that like if you did?
No, I think religion, thank Jesus, thank the heavens, thank every which God you can touch, um, that my folks were not religious. I think that saved me from a lot more burden that it could have been. And I actually do think about this, that I do really am really really grateful that my parents were not religious. Um, However, I did come from a religious upbringing, so because of that foundation, because of that infrastructure, that's always going to follow you. That's always going to be a part of your, your perspective and how you see the world, and your understandings and your misunderstandings. And uh, for as far as for my parents, no, there was never any pressure. There was never any push because, like I said, they were never fans. It was just what it was. It was an inheritance by race. That's what that is. Which is,
Inheritance by race.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, do you have a little bit more insight on what race would that be?
I mean, let's go back to the beginning of this. I would say it's the human race. Unfortunately, meaning in the beginning, I felt like I meant that in a positive light. Unfortunately, now it takes a different turn because this is when the human race gets it wrong. Um, do I mean one in particular? Of course, that would be my background. Being Latin and having an automatic inheritance. It's you don't know anything else. You're not supposed to know anything else. Why should you know anything else? How dare you know anything else?
So, in terms of your family not necessarily being religious, you're trying to say, well, so that I can understand that in terms of the background and having a Latin background, that there's an infusion of religion in the essence of it that is hard to get away from in a way.
Well, no, I think now actually thinking about it on a more, I guess, contemporary uh, ideal, we're continuing. Like it's almost this word is like we're perpetrating an ideal that doesn't exist anymore. And what I mean by that is we're continuing to raise these new generations and these new genders and sexualities with an old religion. So tell me, how is that going to work? So you're trying to manifest and grow like seeds all of these pronouns, but at the same time we're still reading the Old Testament. We're still reading the books from Timbuktu. So
So,
yeah.
so your knowledge of religion, in terms of, because you seem knowledgeable about it. If it didn't come from your family, where did you learn about religion?
Myself, I actually was a fanatic of religion in the
Okay.
beginning growing up, ironically. But
Okay.
I also was not aware or educated about that the same institution that I loved was the same institution that would probably condemn me for being who I was.
That's interesting. So, in terms of, we were talking about social constructs of, how we identify. Um, in terms of like a cultural background, a lot of people would, say, "Oh, I'm Latin or I'm Asian," in that regard, and there is some kind of a link between Latino history and the Catholic Church, and I have heard about how it kind of influences people's perspectives on masculinity, and that can be in some ways influential in how a person sees themselves. Do you have any? Did you ever feel that, or was that not something that you can relate to?
Well, repeat what's the exact question because
In terms of any kind of connection between if you're being like Latin and initially having an appreciation for institutional religion, did you ever feel that kind of influenced the way you saw yourself as a man? You do identify as a man. Did that
my
influence your
masculinity.
masculinity?
Yeah. I guess yes and no. Yes, because you get man and woman, woman, man, and you hear that within every story, within every scenario, every circumstance. So, until I guess, I mean, what's that theory? You build your memory bank starting at the age of, I think, 4 and 5. So, and that's very true because up until my memory bank started building, I would say that I knew what I liked from the moment I was aware. Okay. So from the moment I was aware of what my gender was and what my sexuality was, I started recording that. And simultaneously, you're not aware of it. So when it comes to religion, I wasn't aware of it. So sure, you hear the stories of man woman and you go back to, okay, well, man woman. So I guess that does build a masculinity, whether it's subconscious or conscious. Um, that shifted and changed dramatically as you get older and as the years change. But yeah, I would say that subconsciously, I guess, would be the answer. Subconsciously, it did play a part in my masculinity because, like I said, even though I always was aware that I was gay, um, I didn't actually identify with being gay until I got older. So sure, yeah, religion played a part in the masculinity.
And in terms of your dad, coming out to your dad, how was that similar or different than coming out to your mom?
Did I come out to my dad? um, I, you know, that's, the new Batman movie's coming out, right? So, and the villain in that movie is, one of them is the Riddler. So, everything in subject matter when it comes to my father, I'm calling him the Riddler because there are so many answers, so many unanswers. But when did I officially come out? I didn't come out for myself per se. Who came out for me was his mistress and or my ex best friend slash ex coworker. She came out officially for me on my behalf, unbeknownst to me, to my father. So there's that.
Okay, that's not a positive
Yeah,
experience.
talk about Hollywood, right?
Yeah. Did you, in terms of that encounter, did you feel that it was weaponized in a way against you? Was it was it meant to harm you?
Well, yeah, me being gay, it's been weaponized for me my whole life. The only difference is, yeah, I've never had my head bashed in. Sure, I've never had somebody like, literally like vandalize my vehicle and call me a faggot. But the what the world doesn't realize is you can be taken down for your sexuality in different ways. You know, you don't have to be a poster boy child or on the back of a milk carton. Oh my god, milk carton. Like, who even says that? Like, I just dated myself.
You're showing your age. Just
Right? Oh my god. What I meant to say was in the back of some I don't know, whatever, a pop-up shop.
So, in terms of it being, like you mentioned, you're saying that in terms of feeling abuse or negative reaction from people, it doesn't have to come from violence or physical violence or anything necessarily like upfront. It can also be emotional wounds that you might be able to that you feel.
Yeah, and I think that's something that is not spoken about, and I think it's something that will be spoken about. Talking about being ahead of one's time, what that truly means, it's not a narcissistic nor an egotistical standpoint of view, as some people may construe. What I feel that means is that there are so many taboos in this world, and it really takes a brave heart to start talking about that, regardless whether it's, crushing the ceiling, opening doors, trailblazing, call it what you may. I mean, that's what it takes. And I feel like this is something that we haven't even begun to catch up to because we're still trying to catch up with pronouns and the Caitlyn Jenners of the world and you know, the I don't remember right now. It's catching me with the names, but the swimmer who was, transgender, and should she compete with born females, with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're still, to me, that's in the past already. Like, we've moved on from that. At least I thought we did.
In terms of your peers, if we're talking about generations, how 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 do you feel about how your peers reacted to you or react to you when they meet you as a gay man? Has there been a change since you were a child until now?
Um, that's it's pretty much like the most beautiful unwanted collage you could ever imagine. And what that means is you have the, yeah, I know. Not even with the I know, it was just like the continue of a conversation which came from one of my best friends at the time. She just kind of just continued the conversation. She was like, "Yeah, I was just waiting for you to tell me." And then we just continue on like nothing, and that's what it was. And that's why I always say, like, it's a beautiful ditty. It is what it is, and that's when that phrase comes into correct usage. However, on the other grand scheme, not as beautiful as it should be. A lot of people who, at a younger age, did bullying. A lot of people who did a lot of hateful things later celebrated me, ironically, for being who I was and being gay and being, as, again, this is an audio interview as I remember, so we can't see anything visually, but one would say is I can dress up when it's just not a particular day of the year. So people celebrate that now. People celebrate it in my 20s. The same people who kind of like harassed me and literally demonized me later celebrated me for that. Yeah. So you get the best of both worlds.
How do you feel about that? That what earlier wasn't celebrated now is okay. Do you feel that there's a bit of hypocrisy in that, or do you feel it's genuine?
I mean, what do you call it? It's all of these, again, going back to humans, they all have their different reasons for why they treated me the way they treated me, right? So, unless I really sat there and kind of dissected each and every one of their reasoning or agendas, then yeah, I could probably figure it out. But I have nor the time, nor the day, nor the want, nor the care. So, I
You're
don't
just
know.
being yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's gonna be a question that's probably gonna follow me till, I don't know, till the end of time maybe. But more importantly, like, those are just people in the world. People come and go. But the one person, going back to another question you have, which is my father, that's the one that I'm always curious about. I'm always wondering, like, what's so wrong with my sexuality? What's so wrong with gender?
Do you feel that he has issues with that? That he has he expressed it, or do you feel it's kind of
Oh no, no. I know that his issues are way beyond me. They are all within himself. So when it gets to that understanding, you kind of just unlock yourself and then just say, "Hey, I am who I am, and thank you for making part of me. But I'm gonna pull the beautiful aspects of you and who you are, and then I'm just going to let go of everything else." Because that's a masculinity. When we're talking about gender, that's definitely speaking about masculinity and the toxicity of how that's manifested, how it's seeded into our race, once again, the Latin race, and how it's literally been cared for, it's been nourished, it's been curated, so that it's been existing for generations and generations and centuries, and here we are, and still talking about that ever going seed that just keeps growing.
yeah? There's a phrase they call it generational trauma that I think people inherit. And as you say, you can choose to absorb it, or you can choose to take the better parts and let the rest go, right?
Or yeah, or life can just do it for you. Sometimes, like, even when you're ready or not, what's that song like back in the day? It's like, ready or not, here I come, you can't hide. That's fucking life sometimes, especially when it comes to one's gender and sexuality.
In terms of, you mentioned that you like the art, you like creativity. What has that? How has that like? How is that related to you? How you identify? Like, is that in any way been helpful, or is that something
I
that
mean,
you?
it's been my in the name of the Father, the Son, and whatever other fucking spirit is in the world, That's literally been a saving grace. It's not, I mean, just saying it helped me would be an understatement. Um, if it wasn't for the expression of art, whether it's through poetry, whether it's through short storytelling, whether it's through visuals and compositions, and then you have videographies, and regardless, you're saying something to the world that you feel terrified that you can't say by yourself. And at the end of the day, that's a release. And a lot of times I feel for the world because if they don't have that release, then it consumes you and then you see what happens.
Do you feel that in other parts of the world or the country that they may not have the same opportunities that you have had to feel that kind of freedom of expression? Being that you grew up in LA, which is kind of, it's a cosmopolitan city. Do you feel that other parts of the world are not there yet or different in that regard?
I guess this is where we're gonna get a little controversial. uh, I I don't, and I say fuck all of that. And what I mean by that, and not meaning to be as vulgar, but I do mean, um, we are so caught up in this institution of ministry. Of the ministry is do as we say, not as we do. Meaning, I don't have sympathy. I don't have sympathy for anybody across the country who can't express themselves, say, if they don't have that vessel of art. I go back to someone as simple and as iconic, and yet till this day is probably the most profound writer, which came from such a young age and came from such a horrible, or what is known as a situation. Like, you have an Anne Frank, and then in the modern world you have a Jessica Simpson, and they're both the best-selling book. So what does that say? What does that tell you? You can't have sympathy. You have to find a freaking way to find, whether, I don't know how it is, but you have to find a way in order for your voice to be heard. I mean, that was a question, right? I think. Wait, was that the question?
Well, yes. I'm sorry to make the questions very concise.
I know I got a little
Yeah,
bit.
no,
I got a little
you
bit
did
of.
answer. You did answer my questions in terms of, but there might be if there are differences. I feel that if LA has an influence in terms of being a more open
Yeah, environment. Yeah,
society.
like I said, yeah, you're either Anne Frank or Jessica Simpson. Okay, so like two totally different environments. But the point is, both of those women are best-selling authors, and yet, where did they come from? So you're asking me, oh, my sexual, like my environment. No, fuck that. I know that sounds harsh. I know people are gonna come and probably like pillage my village. People, because there's a sympathy factor that people want to automatically just say, okay, yeah, well, I'm gay, but I'm from Ohio, or I'm from Mississippi, or I'm from here, so therefore it's harder for me. No, it's not. It's harder for you depending on how you make your world. My world under my roof was living with a particular generation, one of which was half. I don't think we specified it, but whether we did or not, um, half Salvadorian and half Mexican. So that half Mexican part, trust me, that was worse than fucking growing up probably in a shack in the middle of Georgia in 1919. Okay? So, yes, I know people are gonna fucking kill me for saying all of this stuff, and how dare even my own community is gonna come and try and, you know, have my head off. But no, I don't feel sorry. It's like it's you got to get your eggs together, and you got to figure out your voice. You got to figure out how are you gonna represent yourself
And do it for yourself.
and do it for yourself. Yeah.
So yeah, then that kind of goes back to my in the beginning how I said, well, how do you identify yourself as? Because you know, for me, I know I'm interviewing you, but my personal feelings about that is I agree with a lot of what you said, that you're expected to tick off a box and to answer these questions. You know, what is your race? What is your gender? And you're supposed to give them a one-word answer. And sometimes I feel that it's like, yes, I can give you the easy answer, but that's not the whole truth, right?
It never is. It never is.
Yeah.
But that's something that it's like I said, it looked upon as trivial, but it really isn't. But one has to think, was it systematic so that people could think that, oh, I'm just checking off a box. It doesn't matter. But since we are realistically living in ancient times now with those types of procedures, one would think there has to have been a strategic, contrived agenda why they needed that little, they convince the public, oh, just check the box, it really doesn't matter, but at the end of the day it really does for the people behind the scenes.
So in this light, all of these concepts are social constructs.
That is social.
That
Yeah, now we're talking about
Yeah,
social issues.
and I find that fascinating because we can have different identifications in terms of you're a gay man, I'm a straight woman,
Who's a gay
but
man?
and our experience is not the same, but our views of the world can at the same time be very compatible. It doesn't mean that we're
Well,
totally from
see,
different
now
planets.
exactly with what you just said, if only we would become one as a human race or as humans. So therefore, now we're going back to I think your original question to me was, how do I identify? And I said as a human or part of the human race. And yeah, it would be. See, if everyone were to get in tune with, as you interviewing me and me as just as a subject, I would say that sure, what would if the rest of the world got on board, what a ride it would be.
I agree. I like how the interview went full circle. I think it's a good ending. I think we have a lot to look back on and analyze. I hope.
Hmm.
But thank you so much
I
for
loved
participating.
it, loved it so much.
It was really enlightening. I loved it. Thank you so much again. Thank you, AD.
Yes, the
And
one.
I wish you the best. And yeah, thank you so
Likewise.
much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Toodles.
Feel safe.